You're not going to want to miss this episode of the AI Show where Disha tells us a little bit about question answering now in general availability. Make sure you tune in. Hello and welcome to this episode of the AI Show where we're talking all about question answering in general availability now. Disha, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Seth, for having me on the AI show. I'm a product manager with the Azure Cognitive Services team, more specifically the language vertical of Azure Cognitive Services. And my team essentially builds NLP features, which are then used by enterprises to power their use cases. And I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's start first with the basic question that hopefully you'll answer. What is
Yeah.
question answering and what problems does it solve?
So, question answering is one of the NLP features that we announced in general availability at Ignite, which was November 2021. So, one of the core use cases that people use our service for is conversational interface, is building conversational interfaces or chatbots. So, essentially, whenever a business has to build a chatbot or a conversational interface, which they then surface to the end customers or even their employees, to build like meaningful user experiences, that is where they use our service, right? And our service can be clubbed with various other cognitive services and bot services to build even more sophisticated bots. For instance, question answering can be coupled with speech to build an IVR bot, right? So that's how businesses use our service. And when we released the service at Ignite, we essentially announced two capabilities. One was custom question answering, and the other was pre-built question answering.
So when we're talking about custom, because the way we talk about these things usually is like we have a model that we just use, and then there's like a custom one where we have to train up. Is this the same kind of thing, or am I thinking of this wrong?
So, yes, you do have a model that you basically train essentially, but with custom question answering, we keep the model static, but users can save the data in one knowledge base essentially. So, what happens is they have their own custom knowledge base of information to which they keep adding the data. They can add various data sources. They can add unstructured sources, semi-structured sources. They can add chit-chat data sets. They can even hand curate, add manually their own Q&A pairs. They can link Q&A pairs. They can do a bunch of customization to the knowledge base. And what we do is whenever a user query is received by the service, we search across this custom knowledge base and return a response, right? So they do not train models per se, but they keep copies of the data, and we basically search across the most updated version that they have published, right? Which is really what custom question answering is.
So if I understand this right, I have a bunch of knowledge that I want the service to answer whenever questions come to it. I can leave that knowledge there with the service, and that's what makes it more customized.
Correct. And you can keep updating it. For instance, today your data is X, and 2 months later, let's say your release date changes, right? So you can keep updating it, and your users will always have the latest information, because the service runs whenever a query is received, it runs each time on the updated knowledge base, right? Instead of taking in past data or caching anything. So you always get the latest information.
I see. So why would someone not use this one and use, you said there was another kind, so there's a custom question answering and then there's the other kind. What's the
Correct.
difference and why would folks use one over the other?
Correct. So with pre-built question answering, so there are many enterprises who probably do not have the bandwidth in the first place to maintain this custom information, or they do not need to really. For instance, they don't think that the data changes too quickly. For instance, it's just a FAQ, right? FAQ page which keeps constant, right? So they don't really have a lot of the changing data that they need to keep updating. Or for instance, uh, they don't want to pay for the storage, right? That's also another reason that you basically, if you keep your data somewhere, you need to pay for storage. So in these cases, when they don't really want to pay for storage or they don't need storage, right, what they can do is they can use pre-built question answering, where what they do is they send the entire block of text along with the user query. And what we do is, what the service does is it basically searches for the response to the user query across the block of text that was received, and just returns a response on the fly. So it's just simpler for them, and it depends on your use case whether you want to really maintain a custom database which keeps on changing, and there's a bunch of things you can do which I'll be demoing shortly. But all of that is not available with pre-built. You just pass a piece of text and a query, and return the response.
I see. So that's interesting because, for example, you may you may not want to have those things stored anywhere else. And you can literally, like, say I have a web page and I want someone to ask a question about that web page. I can send the web page with the question, and it will just give me an answer with the pre-built one.
Yeah, and even more importantly, not for just public web pages. Let's say you have data in, privately saved or in some other storage, which you don't want to dedupe your data and put everything on our storage again, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even in those cases, you can just read out that data, read out the document, just pass the text. Maybe you want to remove some sensitive information and don't want to, pass that. Any of those things you can achieve basically.
I see. That makes a ton of sense, because I was thinking, why wouldn't I ever just store everything over there? But you're saying there might be sensitive documents where you have to clean them, then send them, and then have a question answer. That's amazing. This sounds really cool. Can you show us how it works?
Sure, Seth. So, before I begin with the demo, I would like to show you an example of an unstructured document and a semi-structured document, right? Because I mentioned when I was talking about custom question answering that we support both kinds of documents. So, this is a classic example of an unstructured document that you can see. This is a blog on Surface Laptop 4, and as you can see, there are essentially paragraphs after paragraphs. So it's essentially a few paragraphs tied together, some images, but there's no real hierarchy here. Like there is no pattern to it, no table of contents, no structure here, right?
Correct.
But I will show you a few things that we see here. So there is of course a lot of information about Surface Laptop 4, but there's information around sizes, and there is one piece that I want to focus on, and that is the price. For instance, this is the statement around price that is mentioned on this document, starting at $999, right? So this I asked basically I'll be querying this later on. That's why I wanted you to look at it. So this
Got
is
it.
an example of an unstructured document. Now I'd like to show you a semi-structured document. So again in the scope of Surface products, this is a user guide, like a manual that we get, when we buy something. And you can see there is a table of content, so there's a set structure, right? So there is a topic, for instance, let's say set up your Surface Book. That's a topic, and then the three subtopics. So if someone asked a question about how do I set up my Surface Book, they might want to also know about these three sub steps. So when you have this sort of hierarchy, what we do is we essentially create multi-turn questions, and I'll be demoing that shortly. And that can be achieved because there is a pattern or hierarchy to this document. With an unstructured document, we can't really retain any links between the different paragraphs because there isn't really any links. So we just do a full search across the entire thing. And that's just what I wanted to show you, that these are the two different kinds of documents. Now I'll just directly jump to the demo.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we first visit the language.cognitive.azure.com link. So this basically is the link to our language studio experience. Here, as you can see, we have showcased multiple NLP features. So things like summarize documents, text, detect language, all of these skills you can essentially try out from this interface. And here only I'll be basically demoing both the skills of question answering, that is the pre-built and custom. You can see two tiles here under answer questions. The first tile is essentially the pre-built skill. We're going to be using this to test out the pre-built skill, and the second tile is to test out the custom skill, right? So before we start doing that, we need to have a language resource, right? That's how we essentially access these skills on Azure. So we need to create a language resource, which you can do here. So this is my avatar and my ID. So you basically click on select here, and you essentially, if you already have a language resource that you've already created from Azure portal, you can select that, or you can start creating a new one, right? And you basically fill details around subscription, location, pricing tier, all of that when you do create a language resource. In the interest of time, I've already created a language resource
Nice.
which is called language Q&A, and I'm just going to be using that, right? So it's pretty straightforward, and our documentation explains how to create a language resource for you. So I'll just quickly come here and click on open custom question answering, right? So the first thing you're supposed to do when you come to custom question answering is creating a new project. I just do want to add a note here that whenever a first time user interacts with the experience, they will be given a set of prompts which will direct them to do which step after the other.
Got
It's
it.
currently disabled in my experience because I've already used this a few times, but you will have a step by step guide as to what to do. So as you can see, the first step is to create a project. Now, what is a project? It is like an empty, so when you first create a project, it will be an empty sort of location where you can add your data sources that I was talking about, right? So when you initially create a project, it is like an empty data store. So you basically it's very simple to create a project. You type a name, you type a language, you can look at the other details that you had already selected. Let me just show you what it would look like. So I'll type a name. a type of language, and next. And here is where you can review all the details and click on create project. Again, in the interest of time, I've already created a project. So we'll just quickly look at it, but it's super simple. When you click on create project, you should see your project created in like a couple of seconds.
And then for clarity,
So
this is the one where we're giving it data to learn about. Is that right?
correct, correct.
Got it.
So a project is like a knowledge base where you'll add data sources.
Perfect.
So since we were talking about Surface Laptop 4 and Surface Book and all of that, so I just created a project called Surface, right? And this, let think of this as a project. So we were talking about our use case of powering like a chatbot for custom queries, right? So you can think of this as a project that will essentially a Microsoft can essentially use to build a chatbot to answer customer queries around Surface products, right? So that's the kind of use case one could employ by creating a project on Surface.
Awesome.
So we click on this, and the first thing, yeah, it's collapsed. So the first thing they tell that is you have to manage your sources. So we essentially have to add data sources here that you were talking about, right? So you essentially click on this. You can add URLs, you can add files, you can add chit chat, right? So I've already added a couple of files as that the one that I showed you. I'd added like a manual and I added like a blog, right? And I also added a few questions, manual questions, which went under the editorial source. And it automatically creates and adds those questions in the editorial source. So this is currently my knowledge base has these three sources, right? Now what do I do? So the second step, as you can understand, is probably to edit the knowledge base, right? So we come to this section of editing the knowledge base. Here, as you can see, the moment you click on it, so I had mentioned that whenever we add a semi-structured document, we extract questions out of them, right? And that's how we create the knowledge base. So you don't always have to type question and answers, but we when you add documents, we extract those Q&As for you, which is essentially what you see here. So our system has extracted about 156 pairs, and a couple of them I have added. So this one, who should I call for issues and what about employee discounts, these are the two questions I added. And the others, and which is why you would see a source type editorial under both of them. But
I see.
starting from user guide, all of these are pulled out from the sources that we added. So let me quickly show you one. So here, when we were on the semi-structured document, we spoke of set up your Surface Book, right? So let me quickly search for that Q&A. Set up your Surface Book. Yeah, so as you can see, that Q&A pair was extracted, set up your Surface Book. So that was a question. We extracted an answer, and we also extracted the subtopics: charge your Surface Book, set up Windows, choose a mode. And these are essentially all the three subtopics that you see here. And if I were to search,
That's really cool.
set up your Surface Book here, yeah, this is what you would see. So this is the answer that we pulled out. And then these are the three subtopics. And for each of these subtopics, I can pull out answers. So let me quickly test this section that I'm talking about. So if I, let's say, type set up your Surface Book, how do I set up? Let me just quickly set up Surface Book because so as you can see, the answer was pulled out and all the three subtopics were pulled out. Now, if I click on charge your Surface Book, the answer linked to charge your Surface Book was pulled out, which is essentially the same as you see here. Connect the two parts of the power cord. Connect the two parts of the
Oh,
power. So this is how a multi-turn conversation is maintained by our service, right? We retain the relationships between topics and subtopics to power to send. And what does this help with? It helps the customer. It helps the our customer, which is the enterprise, guide their customer. So let's say they don't really know what they're asking about. So we sometimes help. They can help the end customer. Okay, so maybe they want to also set the mode, so things like that. So this is, and you can always add your own prompts. So it's super customizable, so you can always add more prompts than were there in the original data source.
and
So
it's cool
that's
because
one.
yeah, if you're using your service this way, and I love the editorial part because I thought you could only put documents in
Yeah,
there. But let's just
yeah,
say you're doing telemetry on the service and you're finding a
yeah,
question that that's being asked a lot. You can just put it into the editorial space, and that will answer
yeah.
that question for you.
Correct, correct.
That's
And
cool.
another thing to notice, we have used the service essentially leverages transformer-based models to power these user queries, which is to say you don't really have even similar queries which mean the same. If you have those Q&As present in the knowledge base, our system does a pretty good job of returning the right answer. But the confidence with which it returns the answer might vary. So let's try one example. So if you see the first question, who should I call for issues XXX? I just wrote a random answer
Right.
XXX. So if I type exactly this, of course I should get the right answer, and that's not even what the service is essential for.
Yeah, it's like
But the
cheating.
confidence will be the confidence will be very high. One, because super confident that's the right answer because we just basically typed an exact query, right? But
Right.
that's not how the real world examples are. Users type variations and do very short form questions. So a probable question would be contact for issues, right? Give me the contact for the issues. And here again, our system does return the right response, but the confidence would be slightly different. It would be zero point 0.6, which is not that bad, right?
Right.
So because it was very different from the original Q&A, our system was still able to recognize it because we do semantic matches. But the confidence would be different. So the user has to be smart to understand, what confidence works. For most cases, we suggest, doing a zero point 0.5 threshold, but it depends on use case to use case. So if you're let's say a health care based customer, you need a high threshold score because the margin of error is very low. But if let's say you're a customer who's building, let's say, surface devices, then you can keep a confidence score of zero point 0.5, which is fine, which is mostly going to be right in most cases. But so it depends on use cases. What is the acceptable score for you? So I just
That's
wanted
cool.
to, yeah, yeah.
So that's cool. So
Uh,
it's not just memorizing things and you have to type it
of
exactly.
course,
It's also using transformer models.
of course,
You can also add your own editorial content. You can add whatever other
correct.
content in the custom. Okay, this is cool.
Cool. One last thing about custom Q&A before I switch to pre-built is the unstructured document bit, right? You remember I was telling you to focus on the price here. That's because I'm going to ask a question about the price to my
Ooh,
service. So we had added the unstructured document directly. So and it said starting at 999, right? But let me try asking it what is the price of Surface Laptop 4, right? Because that's what probably the user will be asking. One of the possible questions. So here, as you can see, it's pulled out the correct paragraph, which had that mention of the price, right, starting at $99.99, right? So it did pull out the right answer. And we also enable users to our customers to essentially include short answer responses. You can see a little checkbox here, which I have checked. And here we've returned a short answer, which is very specific. So this short answer feature is very useful in cases where the user is asking for very specific pointed question that when is it going to release, what price what price will it be available for, or which countries is it going to be available at. So all of those questions which are very specific, we can also include short answer responses because that's very straightforward, right? Hey, $999. So they don't need to read the entire text. So this is one feature. And we can again check the confidence, and the confidence is pretty good. 0.76 is a pretty good confidence score for this question. And again, the question was pretty different. What is the price? That was not how it was framed in our document, right? It was framed as starting at $999.9, but the system was intelligent enough to understand that we are asking about price. So
that's
that was
really cool.
one, okay, great. So yeah, so once you have added data sources, you have tested, we have seen a few use cases, then the user is expected to deploy. I'd already deployed it once a little while back, but you need to deploy it every time you change it so that your latest instance of the knowledge base goes to production. And once you've deployed, you can click on create a bot and we will guide you through a separate way of how to link this to Azure bot service. And this is essentially really how people can build bots using our custom Q&A service. So, Seth, should I move on to pre-built question answering
I
demo real
mean,
quickly?
you already floored me with this. I love the combination of putting unstructured, structured
Right.
documentation, and even editorial content, having the transformer models in there also to help, provide clarity to the questions. Even if they're a little fuzzy, still get the right thing. Yeah, I'd love to see how the pre-built one works.
Great. So pre-built is fairly, simple because we already don't let you. I mean, basically with pre-built, you don't really edit or maintain a custom information, so you don't really need to create projects on all of those things. So we clicked on answer questions, and here to simplify the demo, we've already added certain samples. So even any user can actually, whoever accesses this portal, they can select any of these samples. In the spirit of talking about Surface, I'm going to select some sample one where we have just added, essentially it's a piece of text which I borrowed from this manual itself, right? So what the user will do is they will pass a text, they will pass a user query. In this case, they're asking what is the size of Surface Laptop 4 models, and that's it, right? So they're passing a piece of text to us. This is pretty small. They can really pass like a large text, right? And the
Right.
limits will be always specified in the documentation. This is just for demonstration purposes. So this is a piece of text. This is the query, and a system is smart enough to kind of understand the language. And then all I do is just run, right? Just to check whether the system is able to return the response. And uh, of course it did, right? So my question was, what is the size of Surface Laptop 4 models? And it returned the response, both short and long answer. Short answer is 13.5 or 15-inch, and the long answer and a confidence of 70, which is pretty decent. So this is
Wow.
really, so pre-built is super simple to, demo and understand.
Hold on. Let's scroll down a little bit because
Yeah.
it looks like if you scroll, it looks like it even tells you where it found the
Yeah.
answer in the
Yeah.
return
Visually.
JSON. Is that right?
Correct. It was very visual. You can really we underline the part which basically had the answer.
And the reality is that because you're returning that in the JSON, so can you hit the JSON tab for me, because it's probably just in there, like where the text is. Yeah, and that's how you were able to underline. Yeah,
Yeah. Correct.
that's cool.
Correct.
That's cool. I
The
mean,
in the JSON, users can see both the large answer as well as the short, and in the short answer, as you can see, right? Both of
that's cool. So, I mean,
here. Hmm, sorry.
no, keep going, because I don't want to interrupt you. You were showing us.
All I was saying is, here we of course return the top answer, but the user can also specify how many top answers they want in case they really want to do some sort of processing at their end. That okay, I want to display all the three answers and let the user, pick which one is the best, or whatever it is that they want to do, they can do. For demo purposes, we are only showing the top answer, but the user totally can specify how many top answers they want. That's all.
Well, this is fantastic. Is there anything else you want to show us, or where can people go to find out more about this service?
So, of course, you should start by visiting language.cognitive.azure.com, which is our language studio. I have provided, Seth, do you have the
Yeah,
links,
I'm showing it.
language documentation?
I'm showing it right
Great,
now. There's a documentation links. This is
great.
awesome. Any final words or thoughts before we go?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So regarding the future roadmap, what I would like to say. So regarding so this roadmap is essentially around custom question answering. So some customers are interested in knowing what is next. So the couple of things I wanted to mention that we'll be working on. So one is analytics. So as you can understand that um, it's a struggle to understand how people are actually consuming the service in the real world, right?
Yeah.
So we are trying to build some sort of analytic dashboard right here, like within the scope. Like when you open custom question answering, you should see some sort of analytics within the scope of a project. We haven't yet decided where, somewhere here, where the users will actually be able to visit. They'll be able to export the chat logs probably based on their permissions. They will be able to see what score, how we are returning responses at what score intervals, and all of those things, which will help them actually optimize their knowledge base based on real world queries. And the second thing we're planning to work on is currently, as you saw, there was only one instance, right, in the edit environment and one instance in the production environment of KBs, and that's it. So we're trying to also work on versioning so that the users can create multiple versions of the same knowledge base and can quickly roll back, take backups, or just switch between them if something goes wrong. So these are a couple of things that we are planning to work on.
You have thought of everything, Disha. This has been impressive.
Thank you.
This is really cool. Thank you so much for being with us, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Seth, for having us. And please, and if anybody has any feedback, please do share it, with us. We're happy to, answer your queries. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Disha. We've been learning all about question answering now in general availability. Make sure you go check it out. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care.